in your spiritual journey, have you ever felt that something's missing? Like there's a magic formula that you still don't know. Like there's some technique, some hidden wisdom, something else that you've still not uncovered. The reason that I'm here today is I want to help fill that gap for you. And I want to share with you something that happened to me once. I was sitting in the Gurudwara, which for those who are not familiar with it is the Sikh place of worship, a temple you might call it. And I was listening to Kirtan, songs of praise. And my mind was euphoric. I had this experience of total elation. I felt so blissful in that Gurudwara, listening to that Kirtan. And a question came into my mind. Why can't I feel like this all the time? Has anyone had that experience? Why am I experiencing something so profound here, but my day-to-day life doesn't feel like this? What's missing? What's that missing link? That's what I want to share with you today. What I've uncovered, I want to share with you. But first, I want to ask you, take a moment to think, why are you here today? And feel free to just, when you've got an answer, to shout an answer out. What are you looking for from today? Have a little think and let me know. Why are you here? Anyone? Elevate your practice of meditation. Knowledge, okay. Understanding meditation. Curiosity. Confidence, okay. Search for answers. Spiritual connection. I love that word, connection, and I think that's a very important one today. Connect to your Sangat, so to connect with others. Fantastic. Truth. Amazing. One more? Ah, you've been watching. Excellent. No expectations. So thank you for sharing that. Let me share why I'm here today. There's one reason why I'm here. And it's because our religious institutions have failed us. Regardless of which religion you belong to. All religions started with the intention to connect people to the truth, the higher truth. And somewhere down the line, it became about tribalism. Every single religion wants you to stay in your religious box and follow the religious practices, wear the religious clothes, say all the right words. And once you do all those things, whether you connect or not is not their problem. Our religious institutions have knowingly or unknowingly completely misguided us. And so there is a truth to humanity. There is a truth that applies to everyone, and we don't know where to go to find it. That's where I'm hoping I can give you some guidance. But I'm very, very conscious that I'm not an expert on this. I don't see myself as somebody who's got all the answers. I see myself as somebody who's been shown something, and it's my duty to not keep that with me. I always think that if you hear a great piece of music or you watch an amazing movie, the first thing you want to do is you go and tell your friends and your family, have you heard this? Have you seen this movie? Right? That's all I'm doing. Allow me to share, and if it makes sense to you, take it on board. So that's why I'm here, and that's why you're here. So what do we mean by spiritual connection? The word connection came up, truth connection. The reality is that most of us don't know what we're connecting to. We don't actually know, what do we connect to? What are the barriers? What's stopping us from connecting? And how exactly do we do that? Let's talk about barriers. No matter what your spiritual connection is, there are so many other priorities in life, aren't there? So many other things that take our time, our work, family commitments. It becomes very difficult to prioritize. So how do we connect? What do we connect to? Where do we go to look for answers? What I want to do is, I have one verse, one shabad from the Guru Granth Sahib. And I'm going to go through that with you today. The reason I want to do it that way is because I want you to be aware that the wisdom is already out there. But I also understand that it's very difficult to connect to that wisdom, to understand it, to translate it. But before we can try and learn from answers, we must first understand the problem. And the problem is very simple. And the problem is you don't know who you are. And who you think you are has made you miserable. Let me say that again. The problem is you don't know who you are. And who you think you are makes you miserable. Now let's have a think about that. It's all well and good somebody sitting on a stage and saying you don't know who you are. You think, I know everything about myself. I know me. In fact, I know me better than anyone else knows me. Right? But that's not what the masters are talking about. The spiritual masters have all come and said, you don't know who you are. So what are they talking about? What do we know about ourselves? If I ask you, if I've never met you, tell me something about yourself, what would you say? If we've never met before, what answer would you give? You'd give your name? Yeah? Job title? Your career? Interest, hobbies? What else? Family, how you're connected to different members of your family? Your religion, that's a big one. Where you're from? Is this who you are? The truth is, we all think this is who we are. We don't actually know. So of course, this is me. This is my name. This is my job. This is my religion. This is my family. This is my background. What else do you want to know about me? And so, when we don't understand the problem, none of your religious books are going to make any sense, because you don't know what you're looking for. It's like me trying to describe something that you have no idea what it is. If I'm giving you instructions on how to bake a cake, and you don't know what flour is, you don't know what an oven is, you don't know what a cake is, what's the point of my instructions? I can give you all the instructions, but you have no idea of what it is that you're trying to solve. So the problem is something that we first need to understand. Then the religious books, then all the religious teachings and the wisdom can make some sense. So our self-understanding is wrong. And when your self-understanding is wrong, then how you go about living your life is also wrong. Notice what your mind does now. I'm choosing my words carefully and telling you that you're living your life wrong. Notice how it stings your mind. What do you mean I'm living my life wrong? You don't know me? When you don't know who you are, how you live your life is based on your misconception. When you don't know who you are, you assume that your life is limited. The assumption you make is, I was born, I will die, and in between those two, I have to achieve as much as I can. Right? We're all saying, yeah, I was born, I will die, and in the meantime, I'll achieve everything that I can. So what do you go out and achieve? What you achieve, what your focus of your life becomes two things: survive and thrive. When you don't know who you are, your life becomes about surviving and thriving. Now, most of us live in comfortable surroundings. Survival isn't really an issue. And so if your survival is guaranteed, then thriving becomes your entire life. And the way that we try and thrive is we accumulate comforts. This is what our life is. We accumulate friends, family, wealth, career, so that we can spend on having a comfortable life. That becomes your priority in life. And somewhere down the line, someone tells you, but you don't meditate. But you're not being religious enough. You're not doing this and you're not doing that. And so you think, oh, I have to add all those things as well. I already got a big list. Let me add all those things as well. And that's where religious guilt comes in. I don't have time for this. I don't wear the right things. I don't wake up at the right times. Because you've added religion as just another thing to do on your to-do list. So where do we go from here? Sounds like the problem. Let's understand the problem. It's really important. So what are you going to do from this point onwards? Once you've accumulated all your comforts. There is a problem with this way of living. And the problem is, you've assumed that in order to thrive, remember, survive and thrive. Survival's done. In order to thrive, we've been conditioned that happiness is there somewhere. We've all been conditioned that happiness is outside. And then along come these so-called gurus and spiritual masters, and they say, no, you've got it all wrong. Happiness is on the inside. You say, oh, that sounds nice. I'll put that up on Instagram. But what does that mean? We haven't fundamentally changed anything. We still need to survive. We still need to thrive. We still need to go to work every day. We need to look after our family members. What does it mean happiness is on the inside? So the language that the spiritual teachers are talking seems to be completely in opposition to how we live our life. Does that make sense? The things that they're talking about sound nice, but it's not practical. So making a spiritual connection needs to be practical, has to be real, has to be applicable to our daily lives. And this is where there's a disconnect. We don't know how to do those things. So, do we feel like we have a slightly better understanding of the problem? Let's go a little bit deeper into the problem. Have a think. Why do you want to thrive? Survival we understand, right? Why do you want to thrive? Why is it that you go through childhood, you get educated, you get a good job, but then nothing is ever enough? You need more, you need more, you need more. What are you looking for? Any ideas? What was that? Validation. Okay, there was one answer behind as well. You're looking for peace and happiness. To be content. Pleasure. Fulfillment. Good. You're looking for? Yes. Oh, so all the things that you've been brought up, you're now trying to satisfy those. Yeah. Security. Potential. Well, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Purpose. What do we mean by that? Is it the same as potential? Is it that everyone was born to do one thing and they had to find out what that one thing is, why they were born? Is that what we mean?
I think it's more to do with everybody has some sort of special talent or something special about them.
Yep.
Special aura.
Yeah.
And everybody can share that and help somebody with that.
Yeah.
That's more.
So
It's almost like saver.
realizing that one thing that makes you unique and then kind of using that to give to the world, making use of your talents in that way. I'm going to suggest something else. Deep down, what you're really looking for is to feel complete, to feel whole. Because you can realize your potential, and you can do it, and you can go out there, and you can find your purpose, and you can serve, but then what? You can make all the money that you want, you can have the family, you can have the big house and all the cars and everything else, and then what? Is it not human nature that after a while those things wear off? And then you want more. What point do you reach where you say, I've got enough? I don't need anything more. Life is done. Perfect. When do you ever reach that point? You don't, right? Is there a relationship between having enough and spirituality? Go back to what you said you were here for with spirituality. What were you looking for? Give me those answers again. Why are you here today? What is that? What are you looking for? Answers, connection. What else? Elevate yourself. Connect with meditation. Peace. What the spiritual masters realized is that there was something going on inside their head that never felt full. always slightly empty. And what they realized was nothing that they did on the outside world solved that problem. Let's be very clear when we talk about spiritual masters. These masters are not just born and fall out of the sky. These masters solved a problem. They realized that nothing that they did on the outside seemed to get rid of this craving for more. So they said, well, everybody is doing that. Maybe there's a different way. Rather than going outside and trying to fill that void with even more, maybe we go inside and we understand the problem. That's where the solution is on the inside, is what they recognized and what they realized to be the solution to their craving. They found a way to make the mind feel whole. Just before we started, I was in another room. I was looking out the window. And on top of this rooftop, there's all of these birds just sitting on top. And I couldn't help but laugh, thinking, why don't they need lectures on spirituality? What are we doing? We see ourselves as the superior race, and they're all just flying about, getting along with their day. And here we are trying to organize seminars and events and trying to understand the mind and spirituality. What's going on? Why are we the only ones that need this? They don't need to be taught anything. So we need to understand the problem. So I'm going to go through a Shabad with you today. For those of you who have access to Gurbani on their phones, feel free to take those out and follow the Shabad with me. The Shabad I want us to look at starts, E man girhi ke e man udasi. This is a verse by a spiritual master. And in this verse, he talks about what it truly means to be religious. The Shabad goes, Eh man girhi ke eh man udasi. Is this mind attached or is this mind free? That's his opening line. Is this mind attached? Is it weighed down with attachments or is it free? Ke e man avaran sada avinasi. Will this mind perish? Or is this mind going to be imperishable and last forever? Ke e man chanchal, ke e man bairagi. Is this mind restless? Or is this mind unfazed? Is man ko mamta kithon lagi? How did attachments come into this mind? And the central theme of this Shabad, Pandit, is man ka karo bichar. O priest, in this verse, they're talking to the religious teachers that are out there and saying, O priest, why don't you study your mind? Why else are you carrying the burden of studying so many religious books? So, in this verse, the Guru is beginning to show us that in order to be religious, you must understand your mind. So let's understand the mind. I'm going to do an exercise with you. I don't want you to overthink this. I'm going to throw you some questions, some options, and just pick one. Red or blue? Pick one. Okay. Apple or orange? Now this time do it in your mind silently, so you won't influence anyone else. Tea or coffee? This time, close your eyes. Cat or dog? Pen or pencil? Pizza or burger? Water or juice? And open your eyes. When I asked the question, did you choose an answer every time? Yeah? Red, blue, cat, dog. You chose the answer. This is one of the biggest misconceptions that you have. Remember, we said that in order to be religious, we need to understand our mind. The biggest misconception that you have is that you choose what answer is going to come up. You'll think, wait a minute, if you make a choice, if you give me options, I will choose. Red or blue, I choose red. Cat or dog, I choose dog. Of course, I'm making a choice. Those who have studied the mind have understood one thing. This voice in our head is involuntary. What I mean by that is this voice in your head always has something to say, right? But are you saying it? You notice how you can't have these conversations in your religious institutions? This is the problem. In order to be spiritual, you must know your mind. And there is no room for you to understand your mind. There's no time. There's no guidance. And so, the problem of understanding your mind is your own problem. It's much easier to call you religious because you do a whole heap of religious things. But the gurus, the spiritual masters are saying, I'm not interested in any of that. You can't tell me that you've got a spiritual connection because you wear spiritual clothes, or you say certain words, or you do certain actions. The really spiritual ones are the ones who've solved their mind. So the question that we're asking ourselves now is, hang on, you said that I don't make a choice? Well, I made a choice every single time. Let's do that exercise again. Close your eyes. This time, rather than focusing on the answer, I want you to focus on, where does this answer come from? Green or yellow? Shoes or socks? Round or square? Up or down? Bring yourself back. Where does the answer come from? It feels like someone is giving you the answer. Does it feel like you make a choice of what the answer is going to be, or do you wait to see what the answer is going to come up? You wait. Say again? It comes to you. Did anyone else get that? Or are you all adamant? No, I made that choice. Such a simple exercise, right?
Not come from your experience
Sure, but it comes to you as opposed to you making a choice. It's a very important difference.
Have you found that spiritual teachings are great to learn, but not always easy to apply to your own life? Sometimes we all need a bit of support and guidance from people who know what we're going through and can help us find some answers. The Nanak Naam Facebook group helps you do just that. It's an online community where you can ask any questions about life and get answers from other members of the group. Search for Nanak Naam Community Support and join our free Facebook group today.
We can begin to demonstrate the involuntary mind, the mind that just has something to say all the time. I like to think of this mind as a labeling machine. Everything that it hears and sees, it gives a label. You've all done it today. As you're walking around, you're looking and, oh, that person looks nice. That person doesn't look so nice. I'll stay away from that person. Oh, I know that person. Oh, I don't know that person. That person looks like somebody else that I know. Who's doing that? We've been misguided in modern terminology and modern society. We call that our inner voice. That's not your inner voice. That is a voice that's going on inside, but it's not your inner voice. Who's doing that? This is where we begin to understand that you are not the creator of your thoughts. And for those of you who are still struggling with this idea, what do you mean, I don't create my own thoughts? All the good ideas that have come to me are not my ideas? So let's try something else. If you think you are the creator of your thoughts, tell me, what is your next thought going to be? Can you tell me? But if you stop and you observe, okay, I'm the creator of my thoughts. Come on then, create. What is my next thought going to be? What shall I create? And you'll notice the same phenomenon. You wait and something appears. And this is where we need to start now creating a new definition of the mind. I like to think of the mind like fireworks. You don't know what's going to come next. You just wait and something else comes. This is what the Guru means by study your mind, if you really want to be religious. Now, this is nice as an exercise, but what kind of real-life thoughts does your mind give? If your mind just gives random thoughts all the time, are they good thoughts? Are they happy thoughts? Are they thoughts like, wow, my life is perfect, look how great my life is? No. What kind of thoughts does your mind come up with? Negative thoughts. I've got so many things to do. I've got this, I've got that. I'm not a good person. I feel terrible within myself. I have so many worries, so many different duties to attend to, so many problems. But then there are those of you who are sitting here thinking, actually, these problems are not just my mind. There are some real world things that are going on outside that I can't deal with. It's not just my mind. So the kinds of thoughts that your mind is having are not in your favor. You have a lot of worries. So why do we have these worries? Let's go and look at this verse again. So we've read the first verse, we've read the Rahao, which is the central theme, the chorus. Verse 2, now the Guru starts to give some answers. Maya mamta karte lai. The divine creator has bound us to attachments to the world. E hukam kar srishti pai. That same divine one who gave a command and created the whole world. Gur Prasadi Bujho Pai. Oh brother, with the Guru's grace, understand this. Sada Raho Har Ki Sharnai. You must always remain in the shelter of the divine. Make any sense? There's a problem. Spiritual language has now become so difficult that we can't understand it. What does that have to do with the first questions around the mind? There's so much codified language, using terminology, using words that we don't understand anymore. So what's the Guru saying? The Guru is saying you have to accept the mind. Phase 1. Remember we started by trying to understand the mind, understand the problem. Why do we feel the way we feel? And when we start to look at solutions, the Guru's first answer is, understand your mind. Just take a moment to accept this is what the mind does. And there's a beautiful wisdom in that. Because if you can't even accept that this is the nature of your mind, then you'll start having internal battles. That's where mental health issues start. Where you're battling with your own mind. So the Guru says, accept your mind and accept the attachments that you have in your life. You have to worry about things. You have things to worry about. You have duties. You have responsibilities. Let's not fight those. How many people are guilty of doing that? I know I can put my hand up. Because we all have this unrealistic expectation. If only all these things get sorted out. Once these things get sorted out, then I'll feel content. It's the if-only list. How many of you have an if-only list? If only this happens. If only my husband or my wife was like this. If only my kids would behave in this way. If only my job was like this or my boss was like this. If only I could win the lottery. That would solve some problems. The if-only list. The Gurus have said, trust me, that if only will never end. There's always going to be another if only. If you're a billionaire and you have a lovely mansion and you have all the lovely cars outside, and then you look at your neighbor and he's got even nicer things, then another if only comes in. If only I had that, or if only my house was bigger than his house. So these things come into our minds. We have this unrealistic view on life that the world has to do all the right things in order for my mind to feel satisfied. I don't have to do anything. You guys all have to do something. The world has to do something. And then we start praying. Because we can't figure out how to do all those things, so we start praying, how do we get all those things right? So accept that your mind will always have attachments. Accept that your mind behaves in these ways. But towards the end, the Guru hints on an answer. And he says, divert your attention to the divine. What does that mean? Let's begin. The 3rd verse. In this verse, the Guru starts to now describe who is a real priest. Remember, this is singing to the priests, to the religious teachers, and telling them this is what real religion is. So Pandit, jo teha guna ki pand utare. This is a real priest, someone who removes the burden of Maya, of attachment. Look at the wording here. Not somebody who gets rid of all of their responsibilities. Somebody who gets rid of the burden of those responsibilities. They're not telling you to go live in a mountain, to join an ashram, to meditate for 24 hours a day. The Guru is saying, those who can free themselves from the burden of the world. Anadin eko naam vakhane, and day and night sings of the Divine One. The name of that divine day and night. Satgur ki o dikhya de le. They take spiritual teachings, the teachings of the Guru, Satgur age sistare, and they place their head or their mind as an offering in front of this true wisdom. One who is always removed, always detached, and remains in emptiness. There's a beautiful word here used, nirvana. Sada alag rahe nirban. It's a Buddhist word. And it means the experience of a candle being extinguished. That is what we must do with our mind. You know that moment where you blow the candle out and that candle just disappears? The flame disappears? One who is able to enter that emptiness in their mind. So Pandit Darge Parvan. This is the truly spiritual priest who is accepted. This is what is accepted as a real priest. What does that mean? What does all this language mean? Remember how I said the problem is you don't know who you are, and who you think you are makes you miserable? The solution is, if you change your mind, you will change the world. Change your mind. This is now where Guru Nanak's technique of spirituality differs from what you might have heard from other spiritual traditions. A lot of the world is now talking about mindfulness. Have you heard that phrase, mindfulness? Let me tell you what the word mindfulness means. It means non-judgmental observation of thoughts. It's a beautiful technique. Let a thought come, but you don't give any judgment towards it. You just notice it and you let it float away. Guru Nanak gave a different technique. He said, I don't want you to just watch your mind and just see whatever else is coming. I want you to have a refined mind, a reformed mind. The Guru says, I will help you change every single thought that comes up. I will transform your mind. And when you transform your mind, you will transform your life. So how does the Guru do that? Your mind is constantly giving words. There's constantly a conversation going on. We've understood that. When your mind is always talking, it starts building a story. It starts building a story about who you think you are and what your mind thinks about the world around you. And that story then settles into emotions. So there is a direct link. The words in your mind create a story, and that story creates your emotions. If you want to feel happiness, peace, connected, complete, whole, meditative, there's no actions that you need to do. Change your words and it'll change your emotions. Change the words that are going on in your mind. And this goes back to the realization that I had when I was sitting in that Gurdwara, having this euphoria. And the answer that I understood was, why am I feeling this right now when I'm singing this kirtan, when I'm singing these divine words? And I understood the only difference between what I'm experiencing now in the Gurdwara and at home is the words are different in my head. Is this starting to make sense? The words that I was singing while I was in the Gurdwara, the songs of praise, were different to the words that I have when I go about my day-to-day lives. This is Guru Nanak's wisdom. the Guru will change the words in your mind. Once you change those words, you will have a fundamentally different and better experience of life. Now, the word Naam makes sense. What the Guru is saying is don't just repeat your own story all the time. Actively make a choice to sing the praises of everything that's going on right now. Whatever is happening, can you change and actively practice saying something nice about this moment? Let me give you an example. I always remember when I came here from India as a young boy, and I remember a phenomenon of speaking to people from this country, and we love to talk about the weather. And if you can't have any topic of conversation, English culture is that you ask them, oh, how's the weather? Or the weather is this or that. What I noticed was the words that were used when it was cloudy. Nobody ever said to me, it's really cloudy today or it's raining today. You know what they said? They said it's miserable today. And I found that quite strange because I was never brought up looking at rain as misery. It was just rain. They said, oh, it's gloomy outside. Has anyone done that? What have you done? A perfectly natural thing that's going on outside, you've added a negative word to it. And you'll even notice if you watch the weather on TV, the people reporting the weather are also saying it's going to be miserable today. That's not your job. Your job is to tell me if it's going to rain or not to tell me the emotion that I should feel based on the weather. That is a very simple example of what your mind is doing all day. Your mind is actively just allowing itself to just spew this negativity for everyday scenarios. The Guru says, what if you treated everything that was going on around you as though it was a God in front of you? All good and all bad, or all that is, regardless of whether it's good or bad. Remember now, even your words of good and bad start to just become labels. Remember, the mind is a labeling machine? Good and bad is just a label now. But I know what you're thinking. Let's go back to those really difficult scenarios that we face sometimes. How am I supposed to see this as good or bad? Surely certain events are really bad. Surely some things cannot be tolerated. Whether you tolerate them or not, the event has happened. The question now is, what kind of mind do you want to live in now that that event has happened? Not what kind of world do you want to live in, what kind of mind do you want to live in? This is a very simplistic definition of this Naam. The word Naam is a very complicated subject. But what I'm trying to help you understand is there is a solution. Change your words. Change the words that are going on in your mind. Practice saying better things about each moment and notice how your life changes. Naam is not God calling. One of the things that we've been missold is like you're just repeating God's name and somehow God is going to come and shine a light on you. I don't know if you remember going back maybe 20 or 30 years when the National Lottery was first out in the UK. There used to be these adverts on TV where the skies would open up and a big finger would come out and say, it's you. You remember that advert? It's you. You've won this week. That's what we're trying to do with our meditation. When we're calling God and we're just repeating God's name, we're hoping that the skies are going to open and God's going to say, I've heard you. Let me pick you up. But that's not what the Guru's technique is. We're not calling some Mr. God sitting in the clouds. What if you treated every interaction that you have as though you were speaking to God, interacting with God? There's a wonderful story that I learnt in school, hearing it in assemblies, and it's always stayed with me. There's a man who prayed, God, when will you come to my house? And one day he got the answer, and God said, today I'm going to come to your house. And he was so happy. And he was making all the preparations and arrangements. God is coming to my house today. And he's preparing his house, and there's a knock on the door, and he opens the door, and there's an old woman, and she says, I really need some money. Can you please help me? And he says, not today. God is coming to my house. And then he carries on cleaning his house, and there's another knock on the door, and a little boy is standing at the door and saying, please, can I have some bread? I'm really hungry. And he says, not today. God is coming to my house. I don't have time to deal with you. And later on in the day, there's a third knock on the door. And there's a young mother with a baby saying, I have no shelter for this evening. Can I stay with you? And he says, not today. The Lord is coming to visit my house. I must do everything that I can. And by the end of the day, he made another prayer. And he said, God, you didn't come to me today. I did all the preparations. And God replied, 3 times I came to your door, and 3 times you turned me away. He didn't see it. He didn't see the opportunity to interact with everything and everyone as though it was a God. This is where we can get to with practice, with guidance. We can have a drastically different experience of our life. So the Guru is only trying to do one thing in your life: to make your life better. And the way, the technique of Guru Nanak is shabad. The words. Change your words and you will change your life.
A recent study has shown that over 75% of Sikhs say that their life feels stressful or overwhelming. These feelings can develop into depression, alcohol abuse, or even suicide. We believe that Guru Nanak's wisdom can help transform people's lives. Nanak Naam relies on your donation to help create more videos and podcasts like this, to educate people all over the world on how to use Guru Nanak's teachings to improve their emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. Set up a monthly donation today and help change someone's life. Visit nanaknaam.org/donate.
Here's a question we had. From a background perspective, Satpal, it said, we've lost a sister who was a very young mother. And as a family, we prayed and we begged and pleaded to the universe to grant her a little bit more time so that she could look after her little children. But she lost her fight, and we did our best to accept hukam. But it wasn't that easy, as we're in a very dark place. So the question asked is it natural to feel betrayed and let down and forsaken by this very universe whom we're meant to trust? And how can we deal with this turmoil of feelings? And why does the pain of loss keep creeping back in?
The question around grief and is it natural to feel betrayed by the universe? The simple answer is it's very natural. But the reality is that the universe has never betrayed us. The only thing that has betrayed us is our unrealistic expectations of the universe. To suffer when our loved ones die is because we've created an image in our mind that we should only receive in life but never have to give anything away. It's like expecting the sun to always rise but never set. And when you realize how unhealthy that way of thinking is and how unrealistic that way of thinking is, and you become comfortable with the idea that in order to have a sunrise, you have to have a sunset. Life and death are part of the universe, and it is nothing to do with being betrayed by the universe, and it is all to do with being betrayed by your thoughts. We have simply never been told to become comfortable with death. What I love about Guru Nanak's tradition is this is one of the few traditions that does not shy away from the topic of death. Becoming comfortable with death is intrinsic to your spirituality, because spirituality is what? Learning to accept life and to let go of our attachments. Now that's the theory, but how do you actually deal with the reality of it? If you look at, in the West, they talk about the stages of grief. They include things like denial, not even wanting it to happen, anger. When you look at those stages of grief, the last one is acceptance. And what we're told is it's perfectly natural to experience all of these different emotions, and eventually you might come to a place of acceptance. Guru Nanak teaches us to accept at every moment. To accept that which is. You need to understand this word acceptance. Acceptance doesn't mean to tolerate. Acceptance doesn't mean I can't do anything about it, so I might as well live with it. That's not acceptance. That is to tolerate something, but secretly what you're saying in your mind is, I don't want it to happen. I wish it didn't happen. That is not acceptance. Acceptance is, it is, as it was always meant to be, and I'm okay with that. One of the reasons why we struggle with grief is because we feel that us grieving over the loss of our loved one is showing that we loved them. We want to hold on to them. Even if they're not here, the love is here. What kind of person would we be if we didn't cry? That's the thought that we have. And so we feel that we're supposed to grieve. But we're not talking about forgetting your loved ones. What we're talking about is, can we be at peace? And the only thing that gives me comfort when I think about this is, what would my loved one have wanted from me? Would they wanted me? Would they want me to suffer? We have an entire course specifically on grief. We've made it freely available. It was released last year. It's called Grieving with Wisdom. It's a 4-part, completely free course. If anyone's really struggling with that, I genuinely recommend to go through that. It's a very complex subject, and in a few moments, it's not going to be possible for me to give you all the answers. But it's one of those things that there is a solution for. And it's a very difficult subject and a very painful thing to deal with. If you have time, I recommend you go through this course. It's called Grieving with Wisdom. It's completely free. It's available online. And what that shows you is the stages that you can go through, and it helps you. And what works very well is if you actually go through it with your families. Watch it together, talk about it, discuss it, go through that process. We're not saying that you're going to get to a point where it doesn't sting. But it is possible for you to live a freer life that is free from the pain of grief. The one that you love cannot come back. But the pain that you're experiencing is something that you don't have to carry. Grief is ultimately the pain. And I hope that whoever is going through grief, that they're able to put the time and effort in that is required. They say that time is the best healer. That's absolutely wrong. Acceptance is the best healer, and we can be shown how to accept our grief.
Thank you. And just reflecting on what you said, I remember myself going through some of the earlier courses you did on death. And when my now 8-year-old was, I think, less than a year, we nearly lost her. And it was practicing those things beforehand that when I had to revive her, I was very calm, but I'd accepted at that point that she could pass away. And I did not understand that I seemed to be very comfortable with that. It was then when I realized it was the proactive approach I took in terms of getting comfortable with death. So, and even looking at the grieving course, I can definitely say that there's no better time to get ready for this than now, because it will come. And that's just from a personal experience, so thank you for that.
My question is around depression, which I find is not a logical emotion. It's an overwhelming sadness that has no apparent source. So is the way to deal with that then, from a wisdom perspective, to just be with that feeling and be with that acceptance, and not try to judge what it is or be fearful of what it might be, and just that is coming to me, so I accept that. Is that the way to deal with it?
That's a very important question. Is the way to deal with depression to simply accept it? One of the misconceptions that we have around the wisdom of acceptance is that acceptance implies inaction. Every time, whenever I do a talk on acceptance, the question is always, do I need to do nothing then? Do we just literally accept everything? And so there is a misconception between accepting and not doing anything about it. And those two are not related. Depression is an interesting one, because one of the things that we're not taught about depression is the real root cause of it. The real root cause of depression is attachments. The real root cause of depression is your sense of entitlement of what life should have been like. The greater that life has deviated from your expectations of life, the greater your misery. And I understand what you're saying, that at some point it's not even logical. It's just a feeling, but you don't know where it's from. But I would urge you to ask yourself the question, what attachments or what events in life have I not been able to accept? What am I still holding on to? We did a meditation where we lifted all the thoughts of burdens, thoughts about our work, our family lives, things that should have happened in the past, things that still haven't happened and should be happening in the future. The purpose of exercises and meditations like that is to show you the burdens that you're carrying in your mind. And while I agree that depression is a feeling, and a very heavy feeling at that, underneath it there is some unhealthy and unrealistic expectations that we have of the universe. Deal with those. And the way to deal with them is not to work out solutions to every problem in your life. Because remember, life has a funny way of throwing new problems. Life will always throw new things for you to worry about. The way to deal with it is to interrupt your thoughts. And one of the most effective examples that I've noticed, and something that I'm sure everyone can relate to, think about a time when you feel emotionally down, very stressed, very upset. You may even be tearful and crying. And the doorbell rings. What do? You have to switch it off. And you have to go and answer the door, and you have to put a smile on your face. What that demonstrates is each and every one of you has the ability to immediately switch off your emotions. And these are things that we're not shown. We all do it. The bell rings, the phone rings, and you gather yourself and you switch it off. Even if you have to deal with it later, you have the ability to interrupt your negative thoughts. This is the Guru's technique. When the Guru talks about chanting a name, when the Guru talks about change the shabad, the words in your mind, it's about interrupting those negative thoughts. And we all know that we have the ability to do it. We just haven't practiced it. We just haven't been shown that that's what our mind is capable of.
Another question I'll take on here. From a background perspective, this person's a very busy individual. She's a carer to a mother and a father who are health-wise not doing very well. So she's spending a lot of time looking after their parents and also trying to get into a more spiritual state. And she's finding it very difficult. Her question is that, is it important that I devote my life to caring for my parents, or do I put the time for spiritual expansion and meditation above their needs? And often she finds she's very exhausted and falls asleep without saying any prayers, and she's struggling doing both. And finally, when she does pray, she feels trapped in a world of emotion. Why does she not feel elated?
How many of us can relate with that? Life is too busy. We don't have time. There's too many priorities. And even when we sit down to meditate, then all the emotions come out. Then it feels like it doesn't work. One of the interesting things that we see in life today is that dedicating time towards religion and spirituality is somehow seen as being at odds with you living your everyday life. There's a wonderful story from Guru Nanak's life when he was relatively young and he was sent to his sister who lived in a different village, and his sister's husband ran a local store. And it was essentially Guru Nanak's first job. And he's in the store, and the story goes that every customer who came, Guru Nanak was in a meditative state, and every customer who gave and asked for the products that he was selling, he would give 13 of them. Tera, tera, tera. The number 13 in the Punjabi language is tera. And it also means yours, singing to the divine. Yours, yours, yours. This is yours, this is yours. Now the story goes that Guru Nanak would give 13 of everything, and in the end, the owner of the store was very worried that he's selling too much stock and he's not making enough money, and the owner goes and counts, and of course everything is perfectly fine. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is Guru Nanak is meditating while he's at work. Guru Nanak demonstrated that there is a technique of spirituality which he brings to the world which isn't dependent on you taking time out from your life. It's very important that we understand Guru Nanak's wisdom and Guru Nanak's technique. Almost all the spiritual wisdom that you hear from around the world are spiritual traditions developed by monks for monks. And while they are beautiful traditions, meditative traditions, most of them have been developed by people and for people who removed themselves from their daily responsibilities. They lived in an ashram, they lived in a monastery, and they had all the time in the world to sit and focus and meditate. Guru Nanak was also invited to become a monk. There's one encounter where the Guru Nanak went up to the mountains and he met all of these spiritual monks. And the monks say to Guru Nanak, because they recognize that he's a spiritual person, they say, "Tell us what is happening in the world." Guru Nanak says, "The world is burning and the people who can help are up here sitting in a mountain." At a very young age, Guru Nanak was invited to join the monkhood. And he shocked the world when he said, "No, I'm actually going to get married." And all the priests and the monks were surprised. "You can't get married. You're spiritual. How can you get married? You need to join a spiritual order. You're a very spiritual person." Guru Nanak realized something. The spiritual traditions of the time were not made for everyday working people. And Guru Nanak said, "I need to make a spiritual tradition that's for the common person." So they don't need to learn some ancient language, and they don't need to leave their responsibilities. Now the question is, can you learn to create a spiritual practice while you're doing your daily job? Let me give you something practical. When I first left university and I got a job in central London, I would always go for a job that required me to get on the train, rather than a job that required me to drive to the place of work. The reason was I knew that that was a good amount of time that I could actually sit and meditate. And I would get frustrated when I didn't have that opportunity. But then I learned, actually, why don't I do it while I'm driving? While I'm parking my car and walking to the office, what choices do you have for your thoughts at that point? You can be worried, "I've got to do this and I've got to do that." You're not solving those problems, by the way. You're just thinking about those problems. I need to do this, and then my manager is going to say this, and then I've got a presentation, and then later on I've got to meet my friend for lunch, and then after work I've got to do this. You could have all those thoughts. But what I realized was I've got a 5-minute walk to the office. What can I be doing in this time while I'm walking? Guru Nanak gives you a technique called Naam, which is constantly chanting something that brings you into that spiritual space. But he says, "Uthat baitat sovat naam." Do it all the time. If you're a stay-at-home mum while you're doing the dishes, what choice do you have right now for those words? What could you be using your mind for? Notice when you get up in the morning, what thoughts go off in your head? When you're in the shower, when you're doing the dishes. There are so many opportunities for you to meditate, and you miss every single one of them. So I really want you to become familiar that what we're talking about is a completely different technique to what all the other spiritual traditions have recommended. And this is not a disrespect to any of those traditions. They're beautiful. I love meditation. I absolutely recommend find some time to meditate. But Guru Nanak offers something unique. What is your mind doing at every moment?
I've got a big frustration at the moment that I'm trying to kind of come to terms with or comprehend or view in a certain way, and that is leadership across our Sangat. I look at what's happening in Punjab now again with the farmer strikes and various other things. And it makes me kind of like ponder over the Sikhi definition of how best to lead, because there's such disunity that when I certainly look at what's going on globally, be it Brexit, be it elections, be it farmers and things like that, geopolitics has certainly taken a huge turn, especially with the Gaza conflict. So I often wonder, what is the best way to unify and lead people? Is it the definition that we've got a leader at the top of the tree that people follow? Is it the committee of Panj Pyare that might help give advice to a leader? Is it a combination of both? Or is there some other method that I'm not thinking of that could be a better way to create unity and lead people?
So the question is around leadership and how do we lead and what are the best models of leadership to unite a community. I would break those two apart. For you to first understand leadership and disassociate that from uniting, because one is about you and the other is about the others. The Sikh tradition does away with hierarchy and does away with institutions. Over time, of course, various institutions built up. But the Sikh tradition, Guru Nanak's tradition, is you are a leader. We are all leaders. We are self-sovereign. The Guru made us kings and queens. And so first, you must understand that self-sovereignty. And that comes by accepting that regardless of whether I can get anybody else to follow me or not, am I first on the right path? I can give you a personal example. One of the things that I'm always very clear on is how unqualified I am to sit where I sit. Anybody who comes from any spiritual tradition will say, where have you come from? Who is your teacher? What school have you learnt from? What is your tradition? And I say, I have none of those things. But one thing I was clear on, the way spiritual teachings were being taught and being distorted, the wisdom of the Gurus was so different in its essence to what was out there, I didn't feel comfortable sitting at home doing nothing. So I took it upon myself that whether anybody listens to me or not, I'm going to try and do something about it. When I started the YouTube channel, I was not qualified. I didn't know anything about social media, and I didn't know much about starting to create followers. But I was clear on the thing that I needed to do. And for me, self-sovereignty, that meant that if nobody else does it, I will do something, and I'm not going to ask anyone else's permission for it. The very first time we did an event, a few years later, by this point, we had maybe had 15 or 20 videos over a span of about 4 or 5 years. Jaspal and I decided that we were going to do an event in Slough. And we were in a local Gurdwara. And we had posted on social media that we were going to start a local weekly class on Japji Sahib. And we turned up, and I knew that there was going to be like 3 people who were going to turn up there. Jaspal, me, and maybe one other person who had seen the post on social media. And we went to the room that we had booked, and there was too many people there. And we said, sorry guys, we've actually booked the room today. We're here to run a class. And there was about 50 people there. And we said, what are you guys here for? And they said, we're here for your class. And that was the first time that it genuinely shocked me that why were there 50 people in this room when my genuine expectation was there was going to be 3 people in the room. So I disassociated what I needed to do. If there was 3 people there, I was going to run that class. The fact that there was 50 people there, I ran that class. I disassociated what I needed to do with what my expectation of uniting people was. So that for me is a very important aspect of leadership, that self-sovereignty. We can have a conversation around what's actually going to unite the Panth, but I think creating individual leaders is really the Khalsa way. That even at some point you may have to look at everyone else in your group and say, I'm sorry, you're all wrong. I'm going to have to go my own way. Not that we're all rigid and we're not going to have a mentality of collaboration and working together, but that willingness to walk away is so important, and willingness to do something completely different from the crowd. If you are true to what you need to do and you follow that path, there will be people who gravitate towards you. And that's the only form of leadership. And I think maybe I don't have the answer of how to bring a lot of people together, because I don't see myself as a unifying person. Although we have all these wonderful people here in the room today, my goal has not been to gather followers. My goal has been to speak my truth. Speak the truth as Guru Nanak shows it to me. And whoever is out there that needs to hear it will come. The way I do it is even today, when I release any video on YouTube, I've now learned that my job is to create the video and put it on YouTube and press publish. The universe's job is then to go and find out who needs to hear this. So I don't know how do we actually bring people together, because I don't see that as something that I can do. There is some element of, call it grace, call it universal will, call it fate, that the right people will come towards you. And I think that's what Guru Nanak's model was. I don't think he set out to bring everyone and anyone together. There were a lot of people who didn't agree with Guru Nanak. A lot. A lot of people don't know that Guru Nanak was so outspoken in his truth that he was actually sent to prison. Guru Nanak went to jail. We don't know that. We're not taught that history. We like to see Guru Nanak as the soft, cuddly one, and the warriors came later on. But Guru Nanak was outspoken. He was a leader. He was self-sovereign. And if he had one person with him, Bhai Mardana ji, he said, okay, let's go. Let's go speak our truth wherever we need to speak it.
That's fascinating. And I remember that when we first did that at the Gurdwara, and we were shocked. All the shaky videos, that was me.
If you enjoy learning spiritual teachings and you're looking to deepen your understanding, the most effective way is to learn with a group of friends. Right now, you can set up your very own Nanak Naam meetup group from the comfort of your own homes. Gather your friends, family members or colleagues and start your very own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org. There, you'll find a range of Nanak Naam courses designed specifically for groups that you can watch together and discuss. A growing number of people have already started their very own wisdom groups, and it's having a huge positive impact on their lives. Find out how easy it is to start your own wisdom group by visiting livingwithwisdom.org.
A slightly different question, and one which, speaking to a few of you, has come up a few times. How do you deal with your own spiritual journey when you're married to someone that isn't sure if God exists? For example, growing spiritually together when you're at completely or opposing stages.
The question is, how do you grow together as a couple when one of you is spiritual and the other one is not sure that God exists? Treat your spirituality as though God doesn't exist. let's assume for a moment that there is no God. Now what is your spirituality? For too long, we've had this thing hanging over our head that we have to please some God. For me, it has become very clear that there is no man in the cloud waiting for you. So what is your spirituality if he's not there? Spirituality, as we're beginning to understand, is about your mind. Your mind has to be spiritual. And if you make improving your mind your spirituality, it will have an impact on those around you. If you can demonstrate that you yourself are not being indoctrinated into some cult and you're not being brainwashed, but simply if you can demonstrate, my mind is better, and I wish for you to also have a better mind. That should be the only definition of spirituality.
I wanted to ask what you think the physical body, in what sense that, what relationship the physical body has with the mind, and what your take is on that, and is it important or not? Is there any sort of, I don't know, can you use your physical practice to manipulate your mind and or aid your mental state? Do you feel like there is a connection in that, or do we completely disregard that our physical body is just going to perish, so we let it go, and so on and so forth? I just want to know your take on that. Thank you.
That's a brilliant question. Can we use our physical bodies to improve the mind? And is there any connection between the two? Our bodies are wonderful things. And what is a body without a mind? And what is a mind without a body? One of the things with the technique of acceptance is not to create an enemy out of anything. Not to create an enemy out of the mind, and not to create an enemy out of the body. Because once you create an enemy out of the mind, then it becomes something that you're constantly battling against. So, when we start to become comfortable with our bodies, when we start to become comfortable with our minds, then you will start to notice that there are practices that you can do. And essentially that is what yoga is all about. Is about your body's connection to the mind. And again, like I say, all of these traditions are beautiful. They're all wonderful traditions. But all of them have their own pitfalls, their own trappings. And creating an attachment to the body and creating an attachment to the mind is the problem that we're trying to solve. So however you do it, whether you go for a jog, sometimes people say, I go for a jog and I feel meditative, it silences my mind. If anyone's ever done yoga and you do a very active session and then at the end they ask you to lie down, you notice that your mind is completely still. All of these practices are not what you need to become dependent on. These practices should become indicators to show you what is really happening in your mind. But real spirituality is not, I feel calm when I do this activity. Because then you become attached to that. Then now you're attached to the yoga class. You're attached to the teacher, the yoga studio. I can only be calm when I do this. So every meditation is good. Every practice is good. Every thing that works for you, do it. And I recommend everyone, there's no one size fits all. The example that I think works very well is if you ask 10 people how to lose weight, they'll give you 10 different answers. None of those answers are wrong. You have to figure out which is the one for you. And you have to be willing to adapt. Sometimes you have time to go for a run. Sometimes you don't, then you manage your diet. Sometimes you can't manage your diet, then you manage how often you eat. So all of these things are fine. Don't hold on to any one practice. Don't become fixated on one. But be willing to try all of them, see what works, and analyze what is it that is working, what is the solution here. If it is working for you, can I do it without this practice? Can I take the gain that I get from this practice and feed it through the rest of my day so that I'm not dependent on this practice? Because the goal of spirituality is a higher mind all the time. Not that you're only high when you practice, or you only have this elated feeling when you're in the religious place, when you're in the Gurdwara, the temple, the church, the mosque. It's all the time. 24 hours a day. Now, you can't be doing one activity 24 hours a day, but you can have a higher mind throughout the day. So certainly practice any physical form that works for you, but don't get attached to that one thing.
The word Vaheguru only appears in Guru Granth Sahib Ji twice, and not in any of the other writings of the Sikh Gurus. So how did this become a favored word for God, when in all likelihood, the 5 Gurus did not use this term to refer to God?
It's certainly something that I've pondered myself. So the question is around within the Guru Granth Sahib, which is the sacred text of the Sikh tradition. The word Vaheguru, it actually appears about 15 or 16 times, depending on the spelling of it. And as the person asking the question rightly points out, they're not even written by the Gurus. So why has this word now become more prominent? There's 2 ways we can look at answering this question. One is around the history of it, and one is around the practicality of it. For me, my analysis of the history is only my own interpretation of it. And it becomes clear to me that what Guru Nanak was doing was that he was a disruptor. He was there to bring spirituality to the masses, and he identified what some of the problems were. And some of the problems were the very rigid institutions that were there. So Guru Nanak had to introduce new things to the world to break the shackles and say, regardless of which institution you belong, whichever you belong to, you can join this practice. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji creates new terminology, new languages, new scripts. Even the Gurmukhi script is all to take away the dominance of the religious classes that are there at the time. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji does introduce this word Vaheguru. And certainly you're right in saying that in the Guru Granth Sahib the word Vaheguru doesn't become dominant. Actually it becomes dominant a little bit later. If you look at Guru Gobind Singh Ji's writing, the word Vaheguru becomes a lot more prominent at that point. So what's clear is over these 200-300 years history that the words and the institutions of Sikhi are starting to become a little bit more solidified. That's my interpretation of the history of it. I reject this idea that the word is in Guru Granth Sahib, but it's not written by the Gurus, so somehow it's inferior. Because that's saying that there are some Shabads in Guru Granth Sahib that are better because they're written by the Gurus, and some Shabads are not because they're not written by the Gurus. Let's not be mistaken. Guru Granth Sahib is the Guru. If it's in Guru Granth Sahib, it's written by the Guru. The Guru Granth Sahib is the Guru. It's not the Guru of the words of Guru Nanak are better than the words of somebody else. That is not the way to look at it. Remember that the Guru is the entire script, the wisdom in its entirety. That's the textual side of it. The practical side of it is, you're absolutely right that this word has become overly dominant, in my opinion, within the Sikh tradition. There are so many beautiful mantras in Guru Granth Sahib, so many wonderful names for God, and yet the Sikhs, in their desire to separate themselves from every other tradition, have decided that they're not going to chant any other mantra, even though those mantras are in Guru Granth Sahib. So this is why I always say, what is the name that you want to call? So in your own lives, in your own families, you probably have a different name that your families call you than the name that you call yourselves at work. If you're in a relationship, a loving relationship with your partner, you can have multiple names for that partner. And they all mean the same person, depending on where is your affection at that point. You don't call your partner by their formal name all the time. You can call them a number of different things, and they all mean the same thing. You should not be... Now imagine somebody comes to you and says, don't speak to your partner that way, only speak to your partner by their formal name. Does that make sense? It makes no sense. Your relationship with your partner is personal. Your relationship with your child is personal. With your family members is personal. You know what your relationship is. What is your relationship with the divine? It goes back to a question that we had about self-sovereignty and leadership. What is your relationship? Not what somebody tells you. So there is nobody who can tell you that this is the name of God and nothing else is correct. If it is, those people haven't connected. They don't know what they're talking about. All they're talking about is tribalism. This is the word that our tribe uses. Our religion uses this word. If you use any other word, then you're betraying our tribe. That's ultimately what they're saying. There are beautiful mantras, there are beautiful names for God. Try them all. There's a wonderful line from Bhagat Kabir ji. He says, Kabir, Allah ki kar bandagi. Meditate on Allah. How many of you have tried to use that mantra? It's such a beautiful mantra. Allahu Akbar. God is the greatest. If that is resonating with you, make that your mantra. Come up with your own mantra. It is your relationship. And bear in mind, this is blasphemy for the religious classes. Everything that we say here is contradictory to what the religions are trying to teach you. No, Waheguru is the only name for God. And they will take one line from Bhai Gurdas ji, Waheguru Guru Mantar hai. You could argue that's not even in Guru Granth Sahib ji. What about all of the different names for God? Ram, Ram, Har, Har, Tu Hi. There are so many names for God. Guru Nanak didn't limit his names for God. Why should you? Why should we, the students of that Guru, limit? So in any tradition, the word Yahweh, I learned something beautiful about the word Yahweh, the old Christian name for God. The word Yahweh sounds like the sound of your breath going in and out. Your very breath becomes your mantra. How are you going to connect today is the question you should ask.
There is a mention of Kundalini in the Guru Granth Sahib. So, and the implication is that our gurus also use this possibly as a tool. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are around, Kundalini Yoga, especially given that I feel it's connecting me. One of the things you said about the mind, that I'm also interested in Eckhart Tolle. This is a subject, and he mentions about Christianity, about Jesus saying, know yourself. So, the message comes through, across different people who have existed and, try to help people.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good question. The question around, did the gurus do Kundalini yoga? Categorically no, they didn't. The reason we know that is because the vast literature that they left us, which teaches us what is their technique. So there may be one reference or two to the word Kundalini, but that is not an implication that they practiced that yoga. Now, having said that, what you learn through a practice like Kundalini yoga is amazing. So I would recommend anything that gets you out of your everyday mind. Having said that, one of the things that I encourage is once you've tried many different traditions, pick one in order to really take it to the extent that the masters of those traditions want you to go to. You often find people that say, yeah, I tried a bit of Buddhism, and then I did a bit of Zen, and now I'm trying yoga, and then I think I might be a Sufi next, and a bit of this and a bit of that. And it's wonderful to try all those things, but you will never really get to the end goal if you have multiple trainers. And I use the analogy of being an athlete. If you want to reach the peak of your athletic performance, you can't have 5 different trainers. All of them will be good. All those coaches will teach you different techniques. But once they start contradicting each other, because that is their technique to get you there, then what will you do? Then how do you develop? So at some point, you must pick one coach in order to go all the way. And I think that's been something that I've tried. I've tried Zen is a wonderful technique, but it's a very difficult technique as well. And you can't just try a little bit of Zen. It's a very difficult technique, but a wonderful technique nonetheless. Kundalini yoga is amazing. Besides the controversy and the things that are there. And those are also things that we cannot deny. To me, it does taint the technique when the master himself is at least accused of some heinous acts. One of the things is what has been around and proven itself, what is tried and tested. And that helps me to navigate between some of these New Age spirituality teachers, which over time some controversy or the other does come out, or things that have stood the test of time and have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So maybe that's another way to think about it. What's been around? What's actually proven itself over time? And that's not to say that during Guru Nanak's time, I'm sure there were people who were saying things about him as well. But that's where you have to go and you have to figure out what is working for me. And be very clear in your mind, what does it mean that it's working? So I'll give you a personal example of mine because I'd like to share. I have hugely benefited in my life from the lectures of Rajneesh Osho. Transformed my life. Are there controversies around what he did in his life? Yes, there are. Do I agree with all the things that he did? Absolutely not. But am I able to disassociate the wisdom that I gain from some of the negative things? Yes, I am. And I've always been brought up with this one simple technique in life: take the good and leave the bad behind. And so this is a roundabout way of saying that ultimately you have to decide for yourself what is working, but be clear on the end goal so that you can actually start to make your way there, rather than getting yourself attached that I am only a yogi now, so I'm only going to do this, and attaching yourself to labels. Be flexible.
My son asked me about heaven and hell. I couldn't explain to him what we believe. What are your thoughts?
I have learnt over time that I have no room to believe anything. I either know something or I don't know it. If you look at the word belief, if you look it up in a dictionary, it says to put your faith in something that you don't know to be true. To put your faith in something that you don't know to be true. So I can say, I believe in aliens. I don't know that aliens exist, but I believe that aliens exist. I don't know that heaven or hell exists, but I believe. And I realized a long time ago, I can believe whatever I want. But what is truth? What is true? If it is true, can I know it to be true? I don't know what is going to happen to me when this body perishes. I don't know. I don't know where this body came from before. And if I cannot know it, I can't know the experience of the afterlife. I cannot know what my life was like before I was born, so I disregard it. I have no interest in heaven or hell. Nothing in my spiritual practice is dependent on heaven or hell. Whether I go to heaven or whether I go to hell is out of my control. I can do the best that I can here, and it's quite exciting to see what's going to happen next. I don't know. But I also have no interest in heaven or hell. What will I do if I believe heaven is like this, and then I say to somebody, I think heaven is like this, and they say, actually, I think heaven is like that. Now what will you do? You have two different beliefs. The interesting thing is, can you have spirituality without a desire for heaven? Bhagat Kabir ji says, everybody talks about heaven. I don't know where that heaven is. But I experience heaven when I sit with a group of meditators. When I join in the Sangat with the spiritually enlightened masters, I find heaven there. I'm not interested in the heaven after I die, because I don't know. I cannot know that heaven, but I can know this heaven. So the reality is that there is a heaven and hell that you can experience, and there's a heaven and hell that you cannot experience. The one that is dependent on your body not being here anymore, we're not interested in that, or certainly I'm not. Now the question is, are you in heaven or are you in hell? The truth is, most of us are not living in heaven. The truth is, our mind has become a hell. I like to think about this. Imagine the day that you die and you go up to the pearly gates and a big voice says, your time is over. Your life has come to an end. How did you enjoy heaven? And you turn around and you say, no, I realize that I've just died now. I'm waiting to get into heaven. And the voice turns around and says, I created a beautiful world for you with all the wonderful sights that you can see and all the sounds that you could hear, all the colors that you could experience and all the tastes that you could taste. A world with lakes, mountains, beautiful scenery, all the different types of emotions that you can experience and all the different types of people that you can experience. Every scenario that you can imagine is available there. I created all of that for you, and now you're waiting for another one? When I understood that this life has the potential to be heaven, then am I missing it by waiting for the next one? Or can I make this world into a heaven?
Hi. This is actually a collective questions from the questions I've already been asked. We've talked a lot about grief. We talked about leadership. We talked about the parent and child relationship. And when we talk about grief and someone passing away, in Punjabi we use a word pure ho gaye, which is in itself a beautiful word, right? Someone's complete. But we tend to use that normally for someone who's of a certain age, who's had a good life, you know, maybe in their 80s or above. But when someone is very young, potentially in their 30s, they pass away not fulfilling their duties as you would expect them to. And this is a very personal question. You know, my father died at age 36, and father was just a word. I wouldn't describe him as a dad who did anything. And what I'm finding in my life is that I'm just, at this age, now I'm 39, I'm struggling to deal with that grief, that hole that's left in my life, and it's impacting my relationships because I'm trying to grieve for somebody who didn't show me any love, who I have no feelings towards, well, not positive ones, in fact, anyway. How do you deal with that sort of grief where that love never existed, but you know as a father he had a duty towards myself and potentially my mother? And I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
It's interesting that you say that even though he wasn't my father, he was my father, I wouldn't call him a dad. There is a story that is going on in your mind. And the story says, I should have had a proper dad. That's what you're grieving. I should have. Everybody else gets one. Why didn't I? As long as you continue that story, you will grieve. And it's really as simple as that. The event has happened. The question you want to ask yourself is, how long do I want to carry the pain? I'm going to use this as an example. Here is the event. If it happened a year ago, it's over there. If it happened 5 years ago, it's over there. If it happened 25 years ago, it's over there. It never goes. It's always there. But that's not where you've left it. Where have you left it? Here. The event has happened. How long do you want to carry the pain? And this works for even the most simplistic of scenarios in life, even everyday traumas. Sometimes you have an argument with someone. After the argument, I should have said that. That's what I should have said. Right? I wish, wait for him to come back in the room. Watch what I'm going to say next, because you're all planned and ready now, right? And he doesn't come back. The most frustrating thing is they come back in the room and they're over it. And you're not. That is a simple example of how we carry on the story long after. Now, it's months have gone by, and the guy walks past the room and say, I still haven't forgotten. And they've gotten over it. What are you doing? Carrying the pain. Carrying the trauma. There's a question that I've learned to ask myself, and even till today, I still use this simple question. And I ask myself, whenever I'm feeling down, whenever I'm feeling negative, hey, Satpal, are you enjoying this emotion? And it's a little bit of a kick on the backside. And I realize straight away, no, I don't want to be the cause of my own grief. And a simple question like, are you having a good time? Are you enjoying this right now? And it drops. And I'm like, oh, I'm free from it. So that's the simple way for you to deal with it. How long do you want to carry on?
First of all, thank you for your message on oneness. 2 years ago, until 2 years ago, I didn't even realize that Gurbani was talking about oneness, and your lectures really helped me. My question is this: when somebody's worshipping God, is it human worshipping God or universe worshipping universe?
You already know the answer to that one.
No, it's
If you've listened to my lectures on oneness, you know the answer to that one.
Yeah.
As long as you believe that you are separate from God, your worship is of the small worshipping the large, the wave worshipping the ocean. And that's fine. After all, when you're a wave and you realize that you're connected to the ocean, you have this moment of wow and being wonderstruck. Wow, I'm actually a part of this. But a lot of us get stuck there. We're very happy worshipping a God because it retains our self-identity. The wave ultimately becomes the ocean. And that is its own worship. Where the wave dissolves, it loves the ocean so much that it loses itself in the ocean. And most of us are not willing to go that far to let go of ourselves. We want to love God and we want to love the spiritual teachers and the traditions and all the practices, but we want to retain a little bit of ourselves. There's a fear. But when the wave dissolves into the ocean, it doesn't lose the wave, it gains the ocean. When you lose your sense of self, you don't lose, you gain. And what you gain is so much more than what your ego can ever give you.
So my question is around hukam. Often when something's happened, it feels that people, spiritual people would say, well, that's hukam. Then when you're making a decision, I get a little bit tripped up by hukam and free will. Do I actually have free will when I'm making a decision? Or actually I have no free will and anything that's, however it's unfolding, is all hukam? Thank you.
You haven't left me with a nice easy question at the end. This is a very big subject. And it's not one that is easily understood. The question is, do we have free will? Do we have an element of choice? Or is absolutely everything hukam? The word hukam needs to be understood. Most people think that it is either our free will, or it is God's will, or it is pre-written. So if we do an exercise like I wake up in the morning and I have a choice whether to make myself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and I make a cup of tea, was that pre-written? Was that hukam? Did I make the choice or did somebody else make the choice? And we end up in this kind of mental battle, not knowing how to solve that puzzle. Who is doing it? The simple answer is, you and the universe are already one. The universe is acting through you. The universe is not doing things to you, it's doing things through you. And so there is no question of something being pre-written. How can every decision be pre-made? Like there's a book written with everybody's story, and everybody's story has already been written out. And we're simply here to act out the play that's already been written for us. But you will not know this until you begin to experience who you are. If you believe yourself to be the individual, then believe in your own free will and make good choices. Make the right choices. Make the choices that serve your highest purpose. The reality is that eventually you will come to realize that there is no free will. In the same way that we can very easily demonstrate that there is no free thoughts. You have no ability to create your own thoughts. Thoughts are simply like fireworks, they appear. If you have the ability to choose, then the question is, what is your next thought? And it's very easy to demonstrate that you have no idea what your next thought is going to be. Thoughts appear. Decisions appear. The problem is not, did I make the decision of my own free will? The problem is, can I be happy with every decision that's been made? Most of the time, we then go back and look at those decisions, say, why did I do it? I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. That should have happened, that shouldn't have happened to me. The reality is, at that moment in time, that was the thought that occurred. That was the decision that presented itself based on all the knowledge that you had gathered up till that point. That was the decision that came out. Can you now live with that decision? And when a new opportunity arises to create a new thought, can you be comfortable that everything that has led you to that moment will bring the only answer it can bring? The truth is, if you relive the same decision 500 times, you will have made the same choice those same 500 times. Because you know nothing more. All you know is everything that you've experienced up till that moment. The only choice that can occur at that moment is the one that's going to occur at that moment. The same decision 5 minutes later might come up with a different answer, but that's not the same one. That's a different choice. So you have to now trust in whatever the universe is going to do. But that doesn't mean that we don't learn from our previous choices. The previous thoughts that came up may not serve your highest purpose, may not be the best for you. Otherwise, you could become completely lazy and say, well, I've got this addiction and I really want to give it up, but the thoughts, the addictive thoughts keep coming back and I keep just doing them. Then at what point do you actually step in and say, this is no longer serving me? The confusing answer is, even that choice will come when it is right for you. It's not a simple subject. But you start to, the simplest way to begin to deal with hukum is to have a moment of just taking a step back and saying, I trust the decision that's going to come. I trust that the universe is going to do whatever it's going to do. Not the right decision. Be very clear on this. I don't trust that the universe is going to do the right thing right now. The universe will do whatever the universe is going to do. The thought that's going to come is going to come. The decision that's going to come is going to be the only decision. I have no say in the matter. And when you can be comfortable with that, the decision-making process of the mind, based on all the things that the universe has done to you, through you, in that moment, then you resign to the idea that you have any control. And you sit back and say, okay, mind, let's see what you're going to do next.